Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. So I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, where we're going to be learning all about how we can waste less and recycle more. So throughout the year, we receive lots of questions from the North London residents on what can and can't be recycled, and what happens to our waste. So we've been delivering these online presentations on lots of different topics to help North London residents. My name is Kirsty and I work for the North London Waste Authority, and I will be hosting today's webinar, and my colleague Val will also be talking through commonly recycled items, what can and can't be recycled, and what actually happens once the waste is collected from our homes. So we'll just move on to the next slide, please, Val. Please feel free to use the question and answer section at the top right-hand corner of the webinar. You can introduce yourselves in the chat, and also there's an option to add subtitles to your screen if you would like to do this or would find it helpful. Just to note that it's not 100% accurate, and you can do this by selecting the CC option on the bottom right-hand corner. So what we'll do is my colleague Val will be delivering the webinar, and towards the end, about 10 to 15 minutes towards the end, we'll do a question and answer section where you'll be able to basically ask your questions throughout, and we'll get back to you at the end. If we can't get back to you, we will email you, and our email address is at the end of this webinar. So before we start, we're just going to quickly introduce NLWA. So NLWA, as I mentioned, the North London Waste Authority, is the statutory waste disposal authority for 7 of the North London boroughs, as you can see on the map on the right. So the key priority for NLWA is to arrange for the recycling and the treatment for most of these boroughs. So managing the reuse and recycling centres, and also promoting waste minimisation and recycling. So I work as part of the Waste Prevention team, and the key priorities for our team is to educate residents living and working in the North London area on things like reuse, the reduction of waste, recycling, and all things to do with waste minimisation. And we do this ordinarily through events such as presentations like this one, which we'd normally deliver face-to-face. We'd engage with businesses, deliver pop-up stalls and at events, upcycling workshops, and a schools education programme, just to give you an insight into what we cover. And I will show you a few photos in a second. And our priority waste streams are textiles, furniture and food. We run events including clothes swapping events, which are also known as swishing, and we deliver an annual London upcycling show. We also do summer cooking demonstrations like Waste Less Lunch Free or Save Your Spuds, for example, and give and take days. So here we're going to go through some photos just to give you a feel for what they look like. So here we've just shown you the Swish and Style event, and then so that's where you can go, bring clothes, swap them and get some in return. And we also deliver the London Upcycling Show, which runs once a year, and there's a competition for residents to upcycle a piece of furniture, which is always good fun. We also have, as I mentioned, different food waste reduction events whereby we demonstrate ways to use up leftovers and things like that. Really good hacks and tips on how to do that. So Save Your Spuds focuses on that, on potatoes even. So before I hand over to Val, she's going to be addressing, as I mentioned, common concerns that we might face when it comes to recycling, and then hopefully she'll be able to answer some of your questions that you might have on waste and recycling. And if there's any questions that you have, as I mentioned, pop them in the Q&A section, and I'll be back at the end of Val's presentation to begin our Q&A section. So over to you, Val.
Hi everyone, thank you, Kirsty. Can you hear me okay? So I just want to say hi everyone, thank you Kirsty, and thank you all for registering and coming over today to learn more and chat about recycling. So in this webinar, I will try and explain what makes something recyclable, what are the common recyclable materials, and clarify the ones that most of us may get confused and unsure. We are maybe unsure if you can or cannot add them to your recycling bin. We will talk about the challenges most encounter when trying to recycle. Why is it important to recycle, and what we can all do to help following our waste hierarchy, which I will also explain what it is. Just to give you some background and statistics, as all boroughs across the UK have a target to reach of 65% recycling rate by 2030, and whilst individual households are recycling more and producing less waste, the actual overall volume of waste across London will still rise due to the increase in population. Some London boroughs may have a higher recycling rate than others, and this is due to several factors, such as houses having space at the front for their bins, or because they have a garden, as you might be surprised to know, but garden waste is also will also contribute to the overall recycling rate. On the other hand, we find a more transient population in central London, and the vicinities of these areas, such as young population, usually renting and moving often, potential language barriers within the population. So all these factors, they tend to hold the recycling rate to lower numbers. And you can see here that North London Waste Authority collects around 675,000 tonnes of house waste per year, and around 63% of this goes to energy recovery facility. Only around 7.5% goes to landfill, and then around 19 and 9.8% is between composting and recycling. The UK currently recycling rate is, the overall of the UK is 45%. So we here are a bit below of the national average. And that's why we are here engaging with the population, via our webinars and other events, such as what Kirsty mentioned, so to try and change these statistics. North London Waste Authority have reduced its waste by 11,000 tonnes from last year, and we are also always working with the boroughs to increase the recycling rate and contamination levels. For who doesn't know what I mean by contamination or contamination levels, I'm referring to items that are undesirable within your recycling material. For example, dirty nappies, food, or even materials that are just not currently widely recycled, such as toothpaste. Another important thing I would like to clarify before we even go ahead is that every material is potentially recyclable. The question is how difficult and how much it will cost to recycle this. And it's, the cost is, a parallel connection to, is straight or directly connected to the viability, the technology developed, as well. So will this recycled material at the end of this process have any value as well, when we have to think of selling this after? Will there be any interest in the market for this material? So let's just make a comparison here. Aluminium, for example, can be recycled indefinitely. It's a great material, and a can of aluminium will turn into another can, basically. So it is cheaper to actually reuse these cans than it is to go and mine virgin aluminium. But plastic, on the other hand, it's super cheap to produce from crude oil. It is in most things we use. It has a lot of demand for more, and certain plastics are too expensive to recycle or to be recycled to be economically and environmentally viable, and especially the ones that are mixed with other materials. And as promised, I think it is useful to chat about waste hierarchy. And waste hierarchy, as seen here, it is nothing more than a process to determine the most preferred to the least preferred waste management process. In other words, what are the things we can do first in order of sustainability before it goes to landfill, which is the last, desirable option. So maybe if I just show it become a bit clear, because we always in the waste sector use this term. So the most preferred, or the method that creates less impact or the least impact to the environment and produce less waste, is to reduce, which is the green on the top, the dark green on the top. And this means to reduce buying to start with. You know, let's reduce buying new stuff, or rethinking before we throw away something. Okay, so it's reduce, changing our behavior. Manufacturers, for example, can use less materials in their production, and we as consumers can make changes in shopping habits by choosing products that have less or no packaging, for example. Then the next best option in the waste hierarchy would be to reuse. So it's reuse what we already have, or repair what we already have, as seen in the pictures here. It's basically, you know, this is getting a great momentum at the moment and popularity. And we do, as Kirsty mentioned, we do offer some nice workshops and events in regards to reuse and repair. And we are seeing the comeback of reusable packaging, for example. There are some policies being created to first incentive repairing goods businesses. So you can fix your blender, for example, like in the old times, just take into a corner, you know, shop or workshop. We see this already in Scandinavia. And also there are policies where manufacturers will be guaranteeing a longer lifespan of their products. And then the third option is recycle, which is what we're talking today. And recycling is, you know, it's great, it's necessary, plays a major part in helping us to reduce the burden on global resources as well, because we're reusing something. So it is really important. It's a really important step in the waste management hierarchy. It is, as I said, a massive help, and it is necessary, but it's nothing more than a palliative measure. So we're going there and we're trying to, you know, kind of fix the problem that we already caused. So that's why it's very important to try to do the first two steps before even we get to recycling. And the third option, it would be to recover, which is seen here in orange, and which is recovering the energy from this material. And so just going back to the 3 R's that we call reduce, reuse, and recycle, the next best solution, as I mentioned, after that, then it is to recover, or as I mentioned, recover the energy from this material. And this is when the waste is processed in an energy recovering facility, ERF, to produce energy, which goes back to the population and the households, you know, in form of electricity and so on. And in North London, we do recover energy from waste, as I mentioned earlier in the little pie chart, to power our homes. It is a really cool and highly technical process, which leads me to the last option, which is landfill, or, you know, the final disposal. Some materials, they can't be processed in this energy recovering facility as it interferes in the temperature and chemistry of the process, you know, such as plasterboard, for example. For some reason, the chemistry of plasterboard, if you introduce this to the furnace, it will really change the whole process, and it damages. So some of the materials will unfortunately have to go to landfill. And around 10% of the total waste of, I'm lying, because last year is around 7.5% of the total waste in North London was sent to landfill, which is a relatively small amount. But there are still many things that are still going to landfill, which could have been either reused or recycled. In terms of cost, a ton of waste sent to landfill could cost around £90, but it is considerably less to recycle. So we have obviously a lot of, you know, advantages on the cost aspect, but also in the environment aspect, why, you know, recycle is way more interesting. Also, the potential environmental problems associated with landfill are significant. You may know that the decomposition of food and other organic matter in landfills produce methane, which is a greenhouse gas that is a lot more potent than carbon dioxide and interferes and increase climate warming. So, as we are focusing today on recycling, what I would like to ask is, what do you think are the main challenges, or how do you feel are the main problems or challenges that you encounter when you're trying to recycle? So one of the things that we come across from residents is that residents are not quite sure on what can and cannot be recycled, and hopefully at the end of the day you will have a little bit more of understanding of, you know, some things are quite straightforward. We know that paper and and glass are recycled, but you know, there are other things that's a bit trickier to understand. So hopefully by the end of today this will be clear. Another problem that we come across is that, as I mentioned earlier, if you have a flat or have a limited amount of space, it can be tricky to find space inside or outside of your house or flat. And as I mentioned, especially if you live in a flat or a flat above a shop that have no frontage for your bins. A third option would be storage access. Some flats, especially communal flats, may have issues with the waste storage design, you know, originally made for much smaller, you know, sort of waste stream, you know, and that which makes potentially very difficult to access your recycling bin. What I would suggest here is that if you come across a situation like this, try to talk to your local, you know, council and local authority, or maybe your landlord, to see if there's anything that can do to make it easier for you to access your storage. Another you know, problem that we come across is that some residents, they don't find any incentive to recycle, or they believe that they should have a monetary incentive to do so. Hopefully, you know, after today, you will, you know, see in this webinar and have an idea if you think, if you have the same thoughts that, you know, the main incentive here is to take care of our environment, you know, and, you know, you will see how much damage it will, you know, we can avoid by just recycling. Another thing that we come across is some part of the population do not believe that the material they are separating is actually recycled at the end of the process. And just to remind you, if there was no other, you know, aspect in regards to worrying about the environment or having targets to reach, you know, at the end of the day, it is cheaper to recycle for local authority, way cheaper, and the recycled material are now a commodity, and they have their own stock market. Everyone in the process is keen to recycle as much as they can, as it is lucrative to do so. But as I mentioned, you know, boroughs have targets to reach. You know, we have to reach 65% recycling rate by 2030. So we can all rest assured that, you know, we are doing, you know, our side of the story. Adding to this, North London Waste Authority do not tend to, oh no, sorry, this is a different slide. So and the last option that we have here is that some residents may find the process of separating the waste time consuming, and I can totally understand this because we're all busy, you know, and it is just another thing to have to think about it, you know, at the end of the day when you're just, you know, tired of work. But what I can say to this is that if you have a bag, hang at the door, like let's say you don't have space for a little box or anything like that, hang at the door of your kitchen, you know, and once you have actually understood what is and is not recyclable, you know, it might be that the first week or so, it might be a bit time consuming because you have to stop for a second to think, but, you know, after a while, it will be just so easy, you will not notice what you're doing. So, you know, have a go and see how you feel. And what I want to do now is that I wanted to show you, you know, some common recyclable materials, and the ones that most may get confused as well, or unsure if they go or not into a recycling bag or box. So please feel free to add on our chat box if you are facing any different challenges to recycle waste, and we are here to just like trying to help you to find a way around. So here are some common products we see in our daily lives, and I want to ask you, feel free to add on the chat box, are these recyclable? you can, as I said, put in a chat box, and we'll give you a little bit of time, a few seconds for you to think about it. Glass bottles, yogurt pots, plastic food trays, and aerosols. What do you think? Are they, these currently being, currently recycled in the normal waste stream or not? Again, we are focusing on North London. So they are all currently being recycled. I think these are more like it's not very tricky. Apart from aerosols, I believe some people might think that aerosol are not, but they are recycled. Just make sure that they empty and don't try to push the bottle, and make sure that everything else is clean and put it in your box, and it's all going to be recycled. What about these? There are two items here that's a bit trickier than normal. Again, I will give you a few seconds to answer in the chat box if you. So these are also currently being recycled, including used pizza boxes and used aluminium foils and trays as well. However, what I want to say here is that just make sure that there's no food attached to these items. And if it's too greasy, the pizza box, just make sure to, then we can't recycle, because you need to understand the ratio of how much paper there is to the oil. So basically, yeah, just make sure that there's no food in there. Envelopes, yes, but make sure that there's no bubble wrap, in there, because again, it would be two different materials mixed. Now, these are even trickier, okay? And I will go one by one with you guys. I mean, again, feel free to add on the chat box, but I will start going through now. So what do you think about toothpaste tubes? So toothpaste tubes, it's a no. And the reason is it's a mixture material. If you cut through your toothpaste, you will notice that there is two materials. Now, North London Waste Authority do collect this and will recycle only if you clean completely the inside of your toothpaste, which is like really tricky thing to do, and we can't ask you to be doing this, but that's what we're doing at the moment. We can recycle if you clean completely the insides of your toothpaste, but normally it's not recyclable because the two materials can be a bit, too tricky to do, plus the toothpaste inside. What about clean film? Clean film is made of a very poor quality plastic material, and so it's not very desirable and therefore not currently being recycled. Crisp packaging, it's the same. It's mixed with plastic and aluminium. You might have come across some private sector companies that are collecting this for recycling, but this is, again, it's not widely recycled because it's not environmentally, neither financially viable. Salad bags, again, very poor quality plastic and therefore not currently being recycled. Blister packs, for pills and stuff. Again, you can actually see here you got aluminium and plastic. Again, very difficult to separate these items, therefore become costly and environmentally, difficult to do though. And chocolate packaging. Again, very poor quality plastic, very thin, not desirable, so no. So please put all these items inside of your refuse bin. And this is the last one I want to ask you guys. What do you think about this? So polystyrene, which is the one here on the top left. This is the type of plastic that is really undesirable, very difficult to recycle. So it's not currently being recycled, unfortunately. And same goes for bubble wrap, as I mentioned, with the envelope, because it's made of that sort of very poor plastic, plus it's a mixture material in that case of the envelope. And as you have noticed, I do go about talking about currently being recycled or not, and the thing is that, as I explained earlier, if the market suddenly changes and the waste industry find cheaper ways to recycle a material, or if they find that it's more viable, in the practical, technical aspect, and environmentally speaking is doable, then of course this will change, and it will change at any time. And that's why I go on talking about currently not being recycled, because it could change at any time. And that's why I mentioned some companies, you have heard that some companies will collect and recycle some of these tricky materials, such as toothpaste or crisp packaging, such as Walkers, for example. They will pay big money, yeah, for their bags to be recycled, so they can use these for their PR and marketing, purposes. However, although this is a great initiative because it will develop technologies in the future, to do in a big scale. The process, in fact, it's not currently financially and, as I mentioned, not practical, not environmentally viable yet to be widely recycled. But again, it can change at any time. So what about now glittering wrapping paper? We just passed Christmas. What do you think? Fortunately, it's a no. Okay, in fact, this picture here, I don't even know if there's glitter in it. It's just a bit shiny, but the ones that actually have glitter on it. So the problem with that, as you can imagine, glitter is made of plastic, and the minimum amount of plastic removed from that paper will not be, viable to separate those items. So it's a no. And with electrical appliances, there are some boroughs within London, London Waste Authority, that will collect from your home some of your electrical appliances, but most and some boroughs will not. But you can take them to a bank where it will be recycled. So most of places you will find a way to recycle this, and I mean it's including laptops or TV items, blenders, all this sort of thing. And and what about the dirty nappies? For some people it will be like an obvious no, but for others will be like, oh, I thought it was. And the reason why I think there's a bit of confusion is because on the label, when you buy the nappies, it might say it's recyclable or it's made of recyclable material. And that's why now the government is trying to change how products are labeled in regards to recycling, because it can create some confusion. So it is a no. Dirty nappies and even new nappies are not currently recycled. And the reason of the clean ones are not is because there's the mixture of materials. There's so many different materials in a nappy, very difficult to separate this. But the dirty one is quite obvious as well. We don't want to mix, can you imagine like a dirty nappies in the whole process separating your recycling material. Now textile is the same. Most of our boroughs will not, unfortunately, collect from your home. But yes, you can find banks or charity shops where you can take your recycling textile material. So now I wanted to just chat about, if you don't have any idea, or if you do, please make your comments as well. But I want to just try to give you some idea of what happens to your materials, to your recycled materials, beyond your bin, after you have presented them for collection in your box. So the first thing that happens, it is that it will be sent to one of these transfer stations here. Okay, if you live in North London, of course. And from there, it will go to a MRF. Now, a MRF is what, it stands for Material Recycling Facility. And so what happens in a MRF is that the load that came from your truck will be visually inspected for contamination. Now, a portion of this will be inspected. And when I talk about contamination, as I explained before, it would be nappies, food, black sacks. And black sacks is because we don't know what's inside of black sacks. We relate black sacks with, food inside. And but any sacks, to be honest, that is closed, we don't know what it is. That's why we always say put your recyclable material loose in your bin. Textile and clothing is a massive problem because it can get caught on the conveyor belt. So yeah, these are the main contaminants. If the contamination of this load that we are inspecting is over 15%, and it's just literally a view from the track, then that lot or that load will be rejected at the MRF, and it will be sent to waste to be processed at the energy recovery facility, or some items will go to landfill. So back at the MRF, if the load is approved, your recycling material will be then placed onto a conveyor belt, where metals are separated by magnets, glass by gravity, plastic by an optical sensor, super cool thing to watch. And this is separated based on the density and color. And then these sorted materials that, go to different directions in this MRF will be packed, compressed and packed into bales. Sometimes they are pre-processed on site, such as glass can be pre-processed, and glass will be crushed and turned back into sand. And then it will be sent again to be transformed again into a bottle. And paper, for example, the bale of paper will have a max humidity allowed, and hence why some barriers will have your paper separated from the rest, and it will have a lid, and that is to protect against the elements. So if you don't have a lid, try to avoid to put your paper if it's raining. Of course, if it is the day of collection, don't worry about it, but that's a problem, because all materials are sold by weight, and one can imagine that the weight of wet paper will be much higher, and how this could be a problem when you're buying water thinking you're paying for paper. So just some interesting facts for you to have an idea. It is, again, as I said, just as the energy recovery facility, the MRF is also a very cool place to visit. And if you ever get a chance, and of course during COVID, it's not open for visitors, but you can go for it in normal conditions. And of course, as I mentioned, refuse will be, as you can see here, will be sent to energy recovery facility. It will be incinerated, and this will generate electricity. And the residue, which is ash, will be incorporated either in your roads or to make construction materials. And for your garden or food waste, so your food is collected, and then it can either be going to an anaerobic digestive system, seen here, where the fermentation of this food waste will be turned into energy, and the residue ash will be incorporated into compost. But another option is that the food will be processed at an in-vessel compost plant. And normally in this process, food waste is mixed with garden waste and turned into compost. Now, I would like to just, show you or chat about why it is important to recycle. I mean, some people might just have an idea, but there are a few things that are very, very crucial. So, if we recycle, we will have less greenhouse gases released into the atmosphere. And that's because we're reusing, an item rather than going and exploit, virgin materials, right? It also provides a sustainable source of raw materials to the industry and avoids the use of Earth's resources, which is the same thing, but now we're talking about a finite resource such as oil for plastic, for example, or any other thing, that, glass will be made by sand, but it's also finite. Everything that we make something from is finite. Therefore, if we can reuse it rather than chuck away or burn it, that's way better, right? So not trying to speed up, but I will go a little bit faster. It's also cheaper than landfill, for sure, as I mentioned. And recycling will also free up space in landfill sites. As you can imagine, UK will struggle to find space for landfill. It consumes less energy than producing new materials, as you can see here. PET, which is the bottle glass, the plastic bottle that we have, you see on the dark green, blue, recycled material, and the virgin one, it's the light blue, and you can see how much more what the difference of energy that is used from each of them. So massive difference. And it also adds to the right value and behavior supporting a circular economy. And when I talk about circular economy, is that we obviously will be, we make a product, we use it and keep using it, and we recycle them, to keep them in a circle, a sort of a process. What we're doing now is that we take from nature, we make it, we use it, and then we dispose. And when we dispose, we also pollute it. So not ideal. And finally, if we recycle, we will have less waste and plastic reaching the oceans and the food chain. Scientists are predicting that by 2050, we will have more plastic than fish in the oceans. That's a very sad reality. And our last slide is what can we do to help? How can we help? Even though this webinar focuses about recycling, we can start by being a conscious consumer and reduce. So choose packaging-free products, or reduce the purchase of materials, for example, or packaging which are currently not being recycled. Avoid single-use plastics where possible. Try and choose glass, aluminium, and paper against plastic, and refill your bottles instead of buying water bottles. The second thing is that then we can also try and follow the waste management hierarchy, as I mentioned, by reusing or repairing something. Try and buy long-lasting and maybe second-hand clothing. North London Waste Authority, show loads of, events, have lots of events or pop-up, sort of cafe events for DIY and stuff like that. You can also find this online. So there's a lot that you can do to try to reuse your items. And finally, recycle all you can. A lot more waste can be recycled than most people realize. We could all potentially be recycling 80% of our waste using existing services in North London. So check your local borough website or our A to Z list of recyclables on our website for current advice. We will show this right now on the next slide, and that's it. Well, I hope I didn't rush too much at the end. This is all for me. Thank you all. I hope it was informative and helpful. I will now hand it over back to Kirsty for our Q&A session.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Val. I can hear a little bit of a feedback. So if that's still the case, just pop a note on the Q&A. So I can see. And we're going to start with the beginning and get through as many as we can. Basically, if you don't manage to get an answer to your question, we're more than happy to answer them. Just pop an email over to us. The email address is on the current slide, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. So I'm going to be really quick because we've only got about 6 minutes left. So Chris said, if all the Enfield residents reduce the waste coming into their homes and stop buying so many new items, then surely the percentage of recycling will drop. Would this not be referable? So of course it would, Chris. Great question. So as Val went through quite in a lot of detail, the waste management hierarchy does promote the reduction of waste before anything else. And as the waste prevention team, that's something we're really keen to promote, because again, it would reduce recycling and rubbish. So yes, definitely. And then Rob mentioned not pizza boxes. So if you're talking about, you're actually on mute, just to let you know. So pizza boxes can be a little bit controversial if they've got loads of grease on them, and if they are, super meaty, cheesy pizza and they've got grease all over the box, that will have to go in the bin, into the general waste. However, if it doesn't, and sometimes pizzas can come with like an insert, so they're not really touching the box, pop it in the recycling, or alternatively take the top half of the pizza box off and recycle that. That's what I do if it's dirty on the bottom. And then someone else has asked about the dark food trays and whether or not they're recyclable. Really good question. If it's like dark green, grey, brown, they're usually fine. There is an issue with technology at the MRF, which means that some black plastics aren't recognised by the machinery, and I think a lot of supermarkets are starting to change it so it's slightly a shade lighter, so it might look slightly more grey, which then means that the machinery can definitely pick that up. And I think there was another question relating to this, which was to do with why they use black plastics when it can't be recycled. As far as I know, I think it's to do with the, luxury items like meats and things like that looking attractive rather than really considering the recyclability of that item. Unfortunately. So hopefully those supermarkets do continue to change the colour slightly so it can be recycled. Interrupt me if you've got anything to add, Val, but just to note, you still seem to be on mute there. And then someone asked if aluminium tomato puree tubes can be recycled. At the moment, unless, again, if you manage to clean it completely out, I don't see how that can be recycled because it's going to have that tomato puree still inside, even if it's a little bit of it. And then another person asked, is the cap, I think it's the cap they meant to say, of the toothpaste recyclable? Yes, so the top part usually is, and then if you have one of those squeezer containers, sorry, not squeeze containers, like the tubes that you pump, they are recyclable as long as it's completely empty as well. And then someone asked about wax cartons. I can assume you're referring to Tetra Paks, so things like orange cartons of juice, things like that, in which case, yes, they are recycled widely, and they are recycled in Biffa, which is where your recycling in North London goes. So Rob's asked about, sorry, I'm going through these really quickly. Rob's asked about plastic bags from the supermarket. So you'll have to check with your local council, but the majority of North London boroughs do accept plastic, and it's not a high quality plastic. It isn't recycled very well. It doesn't really turn into necessarily another plastic bag very easily. So in terms of recyclability, it's poor. But yes, they are currently collected, and I know there are lots of other schemes that do that as well. So essentially, it's better to have all the materials that are the same recycled in the same way, as clean as possible, if that makes sense. I've also shared NLWA's recycling A to Z if you're not sure about anything and I haven't managed to cover it. So that's there as well. Someone's asked how much of non-recyclable materials can be incinerated to energy. So on NLWA's website, we do publish statistics on a yearly basis. I don't know the current stats at the top of my head, but if you can't find them on our website, do pop us an email and we'll get that information over to you. Sorry, Val, what was that?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So this is what I showed one of our first slides. So incineration, which is the recovery facility, is around 62%.
Brilliant. So that's incinerator. What was the question? It was how much of non-recyclable material can be incinerated to create energy?
But,
so yeah, this will have been last year's data, I believe.
Yeah, but if the question is how much can be, meaning like of the possibility, then anything it can, you can send everything if you want to, but we will try not to. So we're first trying to recycle, and that's why it's so important to, as I mentioned, 80% of recycling of our waste can be recycled. So it's a lot to do with what we put in our recycling box. So if we all do our part, we can definitely send much less to be recovered by,
Exactly. And as someone mentioned, it's obviously much better to reduce the amount that we have in the first place.
Yeah.
Thank you for your comments, by the way, on whether or not you could hear me. That seems to be okay now, so thank you very much. Someone's asked if we can do some online workshops on how to repair household items. So we are currently working on different projects to do with repair. We're not currently doing workshops, but we are doing various things in terms of social media and things like that. So do keep an eye out on our website. And then someone's asked, should plastic bottles, e.g. milk, have the tops removed? Generally, myself and Val would always say yes, because if you don't remove the top and it still seals when it goes into the lorry, you're essentially carrying air which that space could be better used in the lorry. You know, if everyone does that, then you're using up lots of space and you have to go to the recycling facility more often. Sorry to interrupt you, Val. On that note, we're going to have to bring today's webinar to a close. Did you have any final comments?
No, I was just going to add to that question that, but also the actual plastic on the lid is a different plastic, and usually it's a different color, which has a different value. So yes, if you can, please separate it, it's much better.
Definitely, and we do have a separate specific webinar on plastics, which should be coming up very soon. Check out our events page on the NLWA website, and that will be up soon, and you can join us for that one. That goes into all kinds of details about what plastics are, what those codes mean, and things like that. So we'd love for you to join us on another webinar. So on that note, thank you very much. I'm aware that we've slightly run over by a couple of minutes, so apologies. And apologies again if we didn't get around to your question. Do pop us an email. We're more than happy to get back to you with more information and answer your question. So thank you very much. Thank you, Val, for delivering the webinar today. And it's been really lovely. So I hope everyone has a nice afternoon. Thank you.